The wheels of the carriage rattled like shackles. Each turn dragged me farther from the world I had known and deeper into a future carved not by my will but by duty. My father called it an honor, this marriage. My mother wept when the decree was announced. I bowed my head, swallowed my own voice, and accepted. That is what an Omega of royal blood is meant to do. Accept, obey, smile. Yet in the quiet of the carriage, I was no prince nor consort, but only a young man grieving the last vestiges of his freedom. They said the Alpha King of Vathar was a man of iron. His armies had carved nations into submission. His word could silence the boldest of lords. Fierce as the northern storms, eyes like molten gold, he was a monarch that inspired both awe and dread. To his people, he was protector, conqueror, king. To me, he was a stranger to whom I was bound in chains of vows I had never chosen. The closer the carriage rolled toward the capital, the heavier those chains grew. The city rose from the horizon like a fortress hewn from the bones of the earth. Black stone walls loomed high, banners of crimson and gold snapping in the wind. The gates creaked open to a thunder of voices as the people cheered. Not for me, though I was the one they had gathered to see. Their joy was not for the Omega Prince of Lithra, but for their sovereign, the Alpha King who waited upon the palace steps. I saw him for the first time when the carriage door opened. Eric of Vathar stood tall, broad-shouldered, clad in armor the color of night. A crimson cloak rippled behind him like a river of blood, and in the fading light, his golden eyes burned with a fire that made my chest tighten. I lowered my gaze immediately, as etiquette demanded. When I bowed, his voice cut through the roar of the crowd, low and commanding. Rise, consort. No welcome. No warmth. Not even my name. The ceremony followed swiftly, as if the gods themselves did not wish to linger. In the cathedral, beneath painted ceilings that told of ancient wars and victories, I knelt beside him. My heart pounded like a drum in a battlefield, but my voice, when it came, was steady. I, Kael of Lithra, pledge myself to you, to stand at your side as mate and consort, in heat and in winter, in joy and in sorrow. The priest turned to him, and his reply was as cold and unyielding as steel. I, Eric of Vathar, take you as consort, to guard and to command as the bond decrees. Guard. Command. Not love. Not cherish. When the rings were slid upon our fingers and the crowd erupted in celebration, I glanced up at him, searching for even the smallest flicker of recognition. His gaze remained fixed forward. If I was meant to be his equal, he did not see me. I was a crown placed upon his head. Nothing more. The chambers that were prepared for me were vast, draped in silks of crimson and gold. A bed carved of dark wood stood in the center, wide enough for two, though I knew it would not be shared. That first night, he did not come. I sat at the edge of the bed with the silence pressing in like stone. The bond between us pulsed faintly in my chest, a reminder of what had been sealed before gods and men. In stories, such bonds were lightning, souls colliding, hearts entwined. But when I closed my eyes, I felt only distance. He returned late in the nights that followed, his footsteps heavy outside the door as he passed by on the way to his study. Sometimes I smelled the sharpness of steel and smoke clinging to him, evidence of his endless counsels and drills. The bed remained cold, untouched. At the feasts, I sat at his side. He spoke little, and when he did, it was only of matters of state, his words clipped and formal. Never cruel, yet never kind. He treated me not as an enemy, but as something far more hollow, a duty to be endured, a contract to be upheld. The courtiers noticed. They always notice. Behind jeweled fans and polite laughter, they whispered. The king does not favor him. They say the bond is weak. Perhaps the consort is barren. What other reason could there be for such distance? I kept my smile in place, every word of my training echoing in my head. A consort must be graceful. A consort must endure. But beneath the calm, their whispers carved wounds that bled in silence. On the seventh night, when sleep would not come and loneliness gnawed at me, I left the chambers and wandered the halls. The palace was a labyrinth of marble and shadow, torches flickering low. I followed the silence until I found myself before a door half ajar, golden light spilling from within. Curiosity tugged at me. It was the king's private study. I should have turned away, yet my feet carried me inside. The air smelled of ink, parchment, and steel. Maps lay scattered across the desk, parchments weighted by daggers. And there, tucked carelessly between them, was a smaller frame turned on its side. I reached for it before I could think. My fingers brushed dust from the glass, and when I lifted it, my heart stopped. The man in the portrait had raven dark hair and a smile gentle as spring. I knew that face. It was my brother. The frame slipped from my hands and landed with a dull thud on the desk. My breath caught in my throat as my world tilted, crumbling beneath me. I was not his choice. I was not his desire. I was only a shadow of the one he truly wanted. And he had bound himself to me, not out of love, but because fate had left him no other way. The portrait burned in my mind long after I fled the study. Even when I closed my eyes, I saw my brother's smile, painted with a tenderness Eric had never once shown me. That night, I lay in the cold bed with my heart twisting in silence. For a moment, I almost wished the bond between us had never taken root. Better emptiness than this, to be tied to a man who looked through me and saw someone else. But I said nothing. I woke the next morning as though nothing had happened. I washed, dressed, and allowed the maids to braid my hair. When they bowed and called me Your Grace, I smiled. At breakfast, I sat beside my husband, quiet and composed. When the courtiers bowed, I nodded with grace. I played the part of consort so well, none could see the splintering inside me. If Eric noticed, he gave no sign. He ate, spoke briefly to his generals, dismissed petitions with cool authority, and rose from the table without a glance in my direction. I told myself it did not matter. I would endure. That is what a consort must do. The days that followed fell into rhythm. Mornings in the council chamber, afternoons in the gardens or library, evenings at banquets where I smiled while nobles measured me with their eyes. I learned the dance of courtly words, answering questions without revealing more than politeness aloud. And slowly, I realized something unexpected. The courtiers had begun to respect me. They had expected a delicate flower, a fragile ornament to sit at the king's side. Instead, they found me steady, unshaken by whispers, unbothered by coldness. Their taunts, their veiled insults. I met each one with calm poise until they grew restless and quiet. I did not do it for Eric. I did it for myself, because I refused to be broken. It was on the 10th day of our marriage that I felt the first shift. We were dining privately, just the two of us, when a servant spilled wine across my sleeve. The poor man dropped to his knees, trembling. I beg forgiveness, Your Grace, I. It is only wine, I said gently, rising from my chair. No harm done. I smiled at him, soft enough to ease his fear. When I glanced up, I found Eric staring at me. His golden eyes were unreadable, caught not on the servant, but on me. For one heartbeat too long, he lingered. Then, as though catching himself, he looked away and dismissed the man with a sharp gesture. But something in that gaze stayed with me. Another day, another banquet. The hall rang with laughter and the clatter of goblets. A noble woman, bold behind her painted smile, leaned close enough to whisper in my ear. It is said the king has not touched you, she purred. Perhaps you bore him already? How tragic, to be so easily replaced. I did not flinch. I sipped my wine, set down the goblet, and replied, A consort's worth is not measured by whispers in a hall. Her painted smile faltered. The table fell quiet around us. And from the corner of my eye, I saw Eric's head turn. His gaze was sharp, fixed on me, as if I had spoken not to the noblewoman but to him. That night, for the first time, he did not pass by my chambers. He lingered at the door, though he never entered. I heard his breath pause on the other side, heavy in the silence. Then his footsteps retreated. The bond between us began to change. I had thought it lifeless, faint, a tether made only of duty. But sometimes, when I laughed at a servant's joke, I felt it stir faintly, as though someone else's chest tightened with the sound. When I brushed my fingers across the strings of the lute, I thought I felt a pulse in return, as though another heart had skipped to the music. And at night, when I lay alone, there were moments I could not tell whether the warmth on my skin came from my own fevered thoughts, or from him, restless in his chambers across the hall. On the 15th night, the crack widened. A storm lashed the palace walls, rain striking like arrows, wind howling through the shutters. I had left the balcony doors unlatched, and the tempest tore them wide. Papers scattered, candles flickered out, and in my panic to secure the doors, I slipped. The next thing I knew, arms caught me. Strong, steady, burning hot. I looked up, and there he was. Eric. His cloak was soaked, his hair dripping, as though he had come straight from the battlements to me. His eyes blazed with something I had never seen before. You fool, he growled, but his voice cracked, raw and unguarded. Were you trying to be swept away? My heart thundered. I was only. Enough. His grip tightened around me, firm but not cruel. For one breathless moment, I thought he might hold me longer, that he might draw me close and let the fire in his eyes consume us both. But just as quickly, he released me, stepping back, the mask sliding into place. His hands curled into fists at his sides. "Be more careful," he said, his tone flat again. "The kingdom cannot afford a reckless consort." And then he turned, vanishing into the storm. But I stood at the balcony, my pulse racing, the ghost of his touch burning into my skin. And for the first time, I wondered if the chains binding us were shifting into something else entirely. The storm that nearly swept me from the balcony left more than water and wreckage in its wake. It left a memory I could not banish, the feel of his arms around me, strong and steady, the heat of his body pressed to mine. I told myself it meant nothing. A king protects what belongs to him, nothing more. And yet, in the silence of my chamber, I pressed my hand to my chest and felt the bond pulse faintly, as though mocking my resolve. Days passed. Nothing changed, and yet everything did. The first gesture came quietly. I entered the dining hall one morning to find my place already set not just with goblet and plate, but with a cup of sweet tea brewed exactly as I liked it. Honey stirred thrice, steam curling like a caress. I paused, surprised. None but my late mother had ever remembered that detail. When I glanced at Eric, he was reading a scroll, his face impassive. He did not acknowledge the cup, did not look at me. But when I lifted it to my lips, I thought I saw his hand pause on the parchment, as if waiting. I drank. His shoulders eased. Another day, another council. I sat at his side as lords bickered over borders, their voices a drone of ambition. I said nothing, as was expected of me. But when one lord sneered and muttered too loudly, "The consort should keep to his silks, not sit among men of war," Eric's hand slammed down on the table. "Watch your tongue," he snapped, his golden eyes sharp as blades. "My consort sits where I place him. Question him again, and you question me." The chamber fell silent. My throat tightened. He had defended me once before in anger, but this was different. His voice held no rage, only cold certainty, as though the matter had never been in doubt. When the council ended, I lingered behind him, unsure if I dared speak. He turned, caught my hesitation, and for once his gaze softened. "You are my consort," he said quietly. "They will learn to respect you." The words lodged in my chest like an ember. We began to speak in the small moments. Not of love, never of love, but of simpler things. He asked what music I favored. I asked what he read in the late hours. He told me of the mountains of his childhood, wild and harsh, where he had learned to wield a sword before he could read. I told him of the gardens of Lythra, where I used to hide among the roses to escape tutors. Sometimes I made him laugh. The sound startled me, low and rough, like a storm breaking, and he would always catch himself after, as if ashamed. But I cherished every note. And sometimes I caught myself smiling not because I must, but because I wanted to. The walls between us had not crumbled, but cracks were forming, letting in slivers of light. I still kept his secret. The portrait haunted me, hidden in the depths of his study, proof that my place beside him was only ever borrowed. But as days turned to weeks, I began to wonder. Was I only a shadow of another? Or was something new beginning to take root between us, fragile but alive? One evening, returning from the gardens, I found him waiting outside my chambers. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, golden eyes glinting in the torchlight. "Where were you?" His voice was sharp, almost accusatory. "In the south garden," I said carefully. "I thought the roses looked lonely. You should not wander alone." He stepped closer, his jaw tight. "The palace is not without danger. There are those who would use you to strike at me." The air thickened between us. His scent, sharp and heated, curled around me, stirring something restless in my chest. "I am no child, Eric," I whispered, though my voice trembled. His hand lifted, almost against his will, and brushed against mine. A fleeting touch, gone before I could breathe. But his gaze lingered, hungry and unguarded, before he turned sharply away. "Stay within the guard's sight next time," he muttered, retreating into the shadows. But I stood frozen, my skin burning where his fingers had grazed mine. The bond between us pulsed stronger with each passing night. Sometimes I swore I felt his emotions, flashes of frustration, heat, and something softer buried deep. I did not dare name it. And yet, despite myself, I began to fall. Not with the wild abandon of fairy tales, but slowly, like a leaf surrendering to gravity, drawn down by something unseen. Against reason, against the truth I had found in that hidden portrait, I found myself yearning for him. For the warmth beneath the ice, the man who laughed when he forgot to guard his heart, the king who set tea at my place though he never admitted it. It was foolish. It was dangerous. But I could not stop. Then the letter arrived. I was in the library when Eric entered, the parchment clenched in his fist. His face was unreadable, though his eyes burned brighter than fire. "You should know," he said, voice flat as stone. "Your brother is coming." The word struck like a blade. My blood ran cold, my fingers trembling against the page I held. My brother. The very one whose face I had seen in that portrait, painted with love my husband had never shown me. I forced my voice steady. "When?" 2 days' time." His gaze lingered on me, sharp, searching, as though he expected something, fear, joy, guilt. Perhaps all three. I lowered my eyes before he could read the storm in them. "Then I shall prepare to welcome him." Eric said nothing, but the silence between us was thick, dangerous, as if the walls we had built and the bridges we had begun to cross might burn to ash with one spark. And in my chest, the bond throbbed like a warning. The days leading to my brother's arrival stretched like a noose tightening around my throat. I told myself to breathe, to remain calm, but the thought gnawed at me endlessly. When he sees my brother again, he will forget me. I had seen the portrait, proof of what Eric's heart once longed for. What place would I have when the man himself returned in the flesh? I hid my unease as best I could. I attended councils, played the dutiful consort, smiled when spoken to. But in the solitude of my chambers, my composure cracked. I stared at my reflection in the mirror and wondered, what value do I hold when I was never meant to be here? The bond between us mocked me, throbbing with warmth each time Eric's gaze lingered, each time his hand brushed mine by accident. And yet I told myself it was only an illusion, a cruel trick of fate. When he sees my brother, I thought this fragile thread between us will snap. The day arrived. The palace swelled with anticipation. Banners hung from the high arches, trumpets blared at the gates, and nobles gathered like vultures eager for a feast. My brother was not only kin to me, but once considered the pride of our family. The Omega who had charmed courts and warriors alike with his beauty and wit. I stood at Eric's side as the gates opened, my hands clasped tight to hide their trembling. And then he appeared. My brother. He looked almost as I remembered, tall, graceful, with hair like a raven's wing and a smile that could melt stone. Time had only sharpened his elegance. He bowed low before the Alpha King, eyes shining with warmth. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "It has been too long." The court leaned forward, hungry. They expected a reunion, a spark rekindled. My chest tightened painfully. I could not breathe. Eric descended the steps, the weight of the crown turning his every stride into thunder. My heart hammered as he stopped before my brother. And then, he did not smile. He did not soften. His golden eyes, cold as the steel of his sword, passed over my brother as though he were no more than another guest. "Welcome," Eric said, his voice clipped formal. "You honor my halls. May your stay be short and your journey safe." Gasps rippled through the court. My brother's smile faltered, just slightly, though he masked it well. And me? I stared at Eric, unable to comprehend. He had looked at the portrait with such tenderness once. He had guarded it like a secret. Why now, when the man himself stood before him, did he turn so cold? The banquet that night was a storm of whispers. Nobles speculated openly, their voices dripping with intrigue. I sat at Eric's right, my brother across from me, the air so taut it might snap. My brother tried. He laughed, he charmed, he told stories of distant lands. But Eric's gaze returned again and again, not to him, but to me. When my goblet emptied, Eric refilled it. When the hall grew too loud, his hand settled on mine beneath the table, steadying, grounding. The gesture was small, almost hidden, but it set my heart ablaze. My brother's eyes flicked toward us, just once unreadable. Later, when the hall emptied and the torches burned low, I found myself walking alone in the moonlit corridor. My thoughts were tangled, a storm of doubt and hope. "Kael." The voice stilled me. I turned. My brother stepped from the shadows, his smile gentler now, touched with something I could not name. "You look well," he said softly. "And you?" I managed, though my throat was tight. For a moment, we were boys again, standing in the gardens of home. But the memory faded quickly. "Tell me," he murmured, "is the Alpha King kind to you?" The question struck like a blade. I opened my mouth, but no answer came. Kind. Cold. Possessive? Tender and fleeting, stolen moments? What name could I give to what bound us? My silence was answer enough. His eyes softened with pity, or was it sorrow? Before I could speak, a shadow fell between us. Eric. His gaze burned, sharp as fire on frost, his hand gripping my shoulder with quiet force. Your brother has had a long journey, he said, voice low, dangerous. He should rest. My brother inclined his head, composed as ever, though his eyes lingered on me one moment too long. Then he bowed and vanished into the shadows. I remained frozen beneath Eric's touch, the heat of his hand searing through my robe. When I dared glance up, his golden eyes locked on mine, fierce, unyielding. You will not walk alone at night, he said. Not while he is here. The possessiveness in his voice stole my breath. But beneath it, I thought I heard something else. Fear. That night, I could not sleep. I paced the chamber, torn between relief and confusion. He had ignored my brother, yes, but why? Had the portrait lied? Or had I misunderstood its meaning all along? The bond pulsed wildly, tangled with my emotions, with his. And in the silence, I realized something terrifying. I no longer feared that he would not care. I feared that he already did. The next morning, the palace trembled with rumors. My brother had been seen leaving the guest wing before dawn. Whispers spread, an affair, a secret meeting, a betrayal waiting to bloom. At breakfast, the courtiers' eyes were sharp, watching for a fracture. My brother entered, serene as ever. I sat stiffly, hands trembling in my lap. And Eric. Eric rose from his throne. He crossed the hall, each step thunder. And before the court, before the whispers could grow into daggers, he set his hand firmly on my shoulder and spoke with a voice that shattered the room. This is my consort. The bond is mine. Let none here forget it. Silence fell, heavy and absolute. My brother's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes, shock or perhaps hurt. I could not tell. And me, my heart pounded so fiercely I thought it might break free of my chest. Eric's hand lingered on me a moment too long, hot and steady, before he returned to his place. The hall exhaled, but the storm had only begun. I had thought the worst of the storm had passed. I had thought my brother's arrival, cold though it was, would fade into memory. But I was wrong. It began the night after the banquet. I returned to my chambers to find the door ajar, the candles within already lit. My heart pounded as I stepped inside. And there he was, my brother. He lounged against the window as though he owned the place, moonlight silvering the curve of his jaw. His smile was soft, almost tender, but beneath it, I saw something sharp. You wear the crown well, little brother, he said. Almost as though it were meant for you. My blood chilled. What are you doing here? He rose gracefully, crossing the room in measured steps. His eyes, so like mine, and yet not, shone with a heat that unsettled me. You know this was never supposed to be yours, he murmured. It was me he wanted. It was always me. My breath caught. I thought of the portrait hidden in Eric's study, proof of a love that had existed before I ever entered these halls. My brother's words carved open old wounds. You left, I whispered. His smile faltered. I was called away. A duty, a mission, does it matter? He waited for me. And now, his gaze raked over me, cold and assessing. Now I returned to find you in my place. Anger flared, sharp enough to burn through my fear. Your place? Do you think love is a throne to be claimed, a prize to be won? He is my husband. My bond. Your bond. My brother laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. You think I don't see it? He looks at you, yes, but I know what lies beneath. He loved me once, and he always will. You're nothing but a shadow standing in the light that belongs to me. His words struck deep, for they echoed my own secret fears. But before I could speak, the door burst open. Eric stood there, golden eyes blazing, his aura filling the chamber like a storm. What are you doing here? His voice was low, dangerous. My brother straightened, his mask slipping into charm once more. Only visiting my kin, Majesty. Surely that is no crime. Eric stepped forward, placing himself between us. His hand brushed mine, deliberate, protective. You will not come to him unbidden, he said. You will not speak to him as if he were a pawn in your games. He is my consort. My mate. Mine. The room trembled with the force of his claim. My brother froze, eyes widening, disbelief flickering across his face. You mean that? Eric's gaze was unyielding. I do. He had spoken fiercely, yes, but my brother's words have already planted a seed of doubt. Had it been for me? Or against my brother? Did he choose me because he truly loved me? Or because he could not bear the humiliation of appearing weak before his court? The portrait still haunted me, its hidden smile whispering truths I could not silence. I began to pull away. Not obviously, never enough to be remarked upon, but enough. I let my laughter fade. I avoided his gaze at the table. I walked the gardens alone, though once I had waited for his steps beside me. And though I tried to hide it, the bond between us betrayed me. It thrummed with my unease, my fear, my sorrow. One night, as the moon bled silver across the stone floor, he came to me. Eric stood at the door of my chamber, golden eyes burning. "Something is wrong," he said. "Tell me." I forced a smile. "Nothing, Majesty." His jaw tightened. "Do not lie to me." He stepped closer, his scent coiling around me, sharp with frustration, warmer with something else. "I feel it. The bond will not let you hide. You doubt me." The words broke me. My composure shattered like glass, and before I could stop myself, the truth spilled out. "I saw it," I whispered. His brow furrowed. "Saw what?" "The portrait," I choked. "In your study. My brother's face, hidden among your maps. You looked at him with love. You loved him. And now he has returned, and though you push him away, I cannot help but wonder." My voice cracked. "Am I only a shadow of him to you?" The silence that followed was unbearable. I could not look at him. My heart pounded like a trapped bird, desperate, terrified of the answer. At last he spoke, low and rough, each word weighed with truth. "Yes," he said. "I loved him once." The words shattered me. But then his grip tightened, and his voice grew fierce. "I loved him once. Long ago. Before I wore this crown. Before I understood what it meant to carry a bond. What I felt for him was real, but it was the love of a man who did not yet know himself. That time is dead." I trembled. "Then why keep the portrait?" "Because I was weak," he said without flinching. "Because part of me clung to a memory of who I thought I was. But when I look at him now, I feel nothing. Nothing but a shadow of what I thought was love." His eyes burned, golden and unyielding. "But when I look at you, Kael," his voice cracked, raw, unguarded. "I see my present. I see my future. My bond. My mate. The only one I will ever choose." Tears spilled down my cheeks. The bond between us surged, fierce and unshakable, thrumming with his words, with the truth laid bare. "You mean it," I whispered. He pulled me into his arms, holding me as if he would never let go. "I have never meant anything more." The next morning, the portrait was gone from his study. Burned, perhaps, or buried. I never asked. I never needed to. For when he looked at me, I no longer saw shadows of the past. Only the blazing certainty of the present. And though my brother remained in the palace for a time, lingering with his schemes and whispers, he no longer held power over me. He had been the ghost I feared, but Eric's arms were my anchor, his bond my truth. Whatever storms the future held, I knew this. I was not his shadow. I was his mate, his crown mate,